Brother, I'm Dying by Edwige Dantica. Chapter 19, titled Alien 270-41999. My uncle was now Alien 270-41999. He and Maxo had left Port-au-Prince's Toussaint Louverture Airport on American Airlines Flight 822. The flight was scheduled to leave at 12:32 p.m., but was a bit delayed and left later than that. On the plane, my uncle attempted to write a narrative of what had happened to him on a piece of white paper. He titled his note, Épidémie du 24 octobre 2004. Un groupe de chimères ont détruit l'église chrétienne de la Rédemption. It began, a group of chimeras destroyed Église chrétienne de la Rédemption. He then gave up writing sentences to simply list what had been removed or burned from the church, including the pews, 2 padded ballroom chairs used at wedding ceremonies, a drum set, some speakers, and microphones. Once they got off the plane at around 2:30 p.m., my uncle and Maxo waited their turn with a large group of visitors in one of the long Customs and Border Protection lines. When they reached the CBP checkpoint, they presented their passports and valid tourist visas to a CBP officer. When asked how long they would be staying in the United States, my uncle, not understanding the full implication of that choice, said he wanted to apply for temporary asylum. He and Maxo were then taken aside and placed in a customs waiting area. I don't know why my uncle had not simply used the valid visa he had to enter the United States, just as he had at least 30 times before, and later applied for asylum. I'm sure now that he had no intention of staying in either New York or Miami for the rest of his life. This is why, according to Maxo, he had specified, quote, temporary, unquote. Had he acted based on someone's advice, on something he'd heard on the radio, read in the newspapers? Did he think that, given all that had happened to him, the authorities, again those with the power both to lend a hand and to cut one off, would have to believe him? He planned to stay at most a few weeks, a few months, but he was determined to go back. This was why he'd gotten his police report from the anti-gang unit. This was why he had wanted the officer, a justice of the peace, or an investigative judge, to go to Bel Air to witness and inspect, so he could return when things were calmer and reclaim his house, school, and church. He had said as much to Tanzi the day before. I can only assume that when he was asked how long he would be staying in the United States, he knew that he would be staying past the 30 days his visa allowed him, and he wanted to tell the truth. Whoops. Maxo and my uncle were approached by another Customs and Border Protection officer again at 5:38 p.m., at which point it was determined that my uncle would need a translator for his interview. Maxo, a fluent English speaker, could not act as his translator. Documents from the Bureau of Customs and Border Protection indicate that my uncle was interviewed by an officer, Reyes, with help from a translator. A standard CBP interview form would have had Officer Reyes begin by saying, I'm an officer of the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service. I am authorized to administer the immigrant laws and take sworn statements. I want to take your sworn statement regarding your application for admission to the United States. A digitized picture attached to my uncle's interview form shows him looking tired and perplexed. His head is cropped from the tip of his widow's peak down to his chin. The picture shows a bit of his shoulder, which is slumped back away from the frame. He's wearing a jacket, the same one that, according to Maxo, he'd been wearing since he had left his house in Bel Air. Though he is facing the camera, his eyes are turned sideways, possibly toward the photographer. The interview began with Officer Reyes asking my uncle, Do you understand what I have said to you? Yes, answered my uncle. Are you willing to answer my questions at this time? After making my uncle swear and affirm that all the statements he was about to make would be true and complete, Officer Reyes asked him to state his full name. Dantica, Joseph Nocius, answered my uncle. Of what country are you a citizen? Haiti. Do you have any reason to believe you are a citizen of the United States? No. Do you have any family, mother, father, brother, sister, spouse, or child who are citizens or permanent residents of the United States. My uncle replied that he had two brothers in the United States, one, my father, a naturalized U.S. citizen, and the second, my Uncle Frank, a permanent resident. "What is your purpose in entering the United States today?" asked Officer Reyes. "Because a group that is causing trouble in Haiti wants to kill me," my uncle answered. According to the transcript, Officer Reyes did not ask for further explanation or details. "How much money do you have?" he asked, proceeding with the interview. My uncle answered him that he had $1,009 US with him. "What is your occupation?" asked Officer Reyes. The translator has my uncle saying, "I am a priest," but he most likely said he was an évêque, or bishop, or elder pastor. "What documents do you present today to the first Customs and Border Protection officer that you encountered?" asked Officer Reyes. "My Haitian passport and immigration forms," my uncle answered. "What name is on those documents?" "Dantica, Joseph Nocius." "In the name of the documents, is the name on the documents your true and correct name?" "Yes." "Have you ever used any other names?" "No." "Are you currently taking any prescription medication for any health condition?" asked Officer Reyes. The translator has my uncle saying, "Yes," for back pain and chest, and in parentheses writes ibuprofen. The transcript has neither my uncle nor the interviewer mentioning 2 rum bottles filled with herbal medicine, one for himself and one for my father, as well as the smaller bottles of prescription pills he was taking for his blood pressure and inflamed prostate. "How would you describe your current health status?" Officer Reyes continued. According to the transcript, my uncle answered, "Not bad." He had probably said, "Papi mal," just as my father continued to, even as he lay dying. "Have you ever been arrested before at any time or in any place?" "No." "Why exactly are you requesting for political asylum in the United States today?" "Because they burned down my church in Haiti and I fear for my life." Again, no further explanation or details were requested, and my uncle did not offer more. "Have you had applied for political asylum before in the United States or any other country?" "No." "Have anyone ever petitioned for you to become a United States legal permanent resident?" "No." "Were you in the United States in the year 1984? "Yes, but I do not remember." I couldn't remember either whether or not he had been in the United States in 1984. I knew that he had been the year before during the summer of 1983 when we got the voice box, but could not recall if he'd returned the following year. Have you had any encounter the United States Immigration Services before?" "No." "Why did you leave your home country of last residence?" "Because I fear for my life in Haiti, and they burned down my church." "Do you have any fear or concern about being returned to your home country or being removed from the United States?" "Yes." "Would you be harmed if you are returned to your home country of last residence?" "Yes." "Did you understand my questions?" "Yes." "Do you have any questions, or is there anything you'd like to add?" "No." My uncle was then asked to sign the statement. He was supposed to have initialed each page of the translated transcript, but instead he signed his name on all 5 pages. A CBP log shows he was then returned to the waiting area where at 7:40 p.m. he was given some soda and chips. At 10:03 p.m. my Uncle Frank received a call at his home in Brooklyn. The male CBP officer who called him asked Uncle Frank whether Uncle Joseph had filed an application to become a U.S. resident in 1984. Uncle Frank said no. Later, Department of Homeland Security files would show that a September 22, 1983 request had been made by Kings County Hospital, where my uncle had had his surgery and subsequent follow-up visits, to the United States Department of Justice about my uncle's immigration status. As a result of this, on February 14, 1984, an immigration alien file, number 270-41999, a file he was never aware of, was opened for my uncle. The file was subsequently closed. He's been coming to the United States for more than 30 years. Uncle Frank remembers telling the CBP officer who called him. If he wanted to stay, he would have stayed a long time ago. Uncle Frank then asked if he could speak to Uncle Joseph. They say they're going to put me in prison, Uncle Frank remembers Uncle Joseph saying. It was difficult to register emotion on the voice box, but Uncle Frank thought he sounded like he was caught up in something that he had no way of understanding. It's not true. They can't put you in prison, Uncle Frank recalls telling him. You have a visa. You have papers. Did you tell them how long you've been coming here? Uncle Frank then asked Uncle Joseph to put the CBP officer on the phone again. He's going to Chrome, the officer said. He can't, Uncle Frank said. He's 81 years old, an old man. Uncle Frank then asked if he could speak to my uncle one more time. The CBP officer told him, "We already have a translator for him," and hung up. At 11 p.m., my uncle was given some chips and soda again. At 11:45 p.m., he signed a form saying his personal property was returned to him. The form lists as personal property only his $1,009 and a silver-colored wristwatch. At 1:30 a.m., I received my phone call. At 4:20 a.m., my uncle and Maxo were transported to the airport's satellite detention center, which was in another concourse. By then, my uncle was so cold that he wrapped the woolen airplane blanket he was given tightly around him as he curled up in a fetal position on a cement bed until 7:15 a.m. At around 7:30 a.m., they left the detention area to board a white van to Chrome. Maxo was handcuffed, but asked if my uncle could not be handcuffed because of his age. The officer agreed not to handcuff my uncle, but told Maxo to tell my uncle that if he tried to escape, he would be shot. There is a form called a Discretionary Authority Checklist for alien applicants, which is meant to assist examining Customs and Border Protection officers in deciding whether to detain or release a person like my uncle. On the checklist are questions such as, does the alien pose a threat to the United States, have a criminal history or terrorist affiliations or ties? Is she or he likely to contribute to the illegal population or pose some other credible threat? Noting the nature of my uncle's inadmissibility, Officer Reyes cited a positive Central Index System search involving the February 14, 1984 immigration file and alien number. In the remarks section beneath his check mark, he wrote, "Subject has an A pound sign, or an alien registration number." In a more detailed memo, he would later write, "The Central Index System revealed that subject had an existing A 2704199 number, which revealed a negative results to him being a resident. The Central Index System did not contain any information on the subject except his name and date of birth and the activity date of 2/14/1984. Still, I suspect that my uncle was treated according to a biased immigration policy dating back from the early 1980s, when Haitians began arriving in Florida in large numbers by boat. In Florida, where Cuban refugees are, as long as they're able to set foot on dry land, immediately processed and released to their families, Haitian asylum seekers are disproportionately detained, then deported. While Hondurans and Nicaraguans have continued to receive protected status for nearly 10 years since Hurricane Mitch struck their homelands, Haitians were deported to the flood zones weeks after Tropical Storm Jeanne blanketed an entire city in water and the way Hurricane Katrina did parts of New Orleans. Was my uncle going to jail because he was Haitian? This is a question he probably asked himself. This is a question I still ask myself. Was he going to jail because he was black? If he were white, Cuban, anything other than Haitian, would he have been going to Chrome? Are age and health factors in this situation demands the discretionary authority checklist for alien applicants. In spite of my uncle's 81 years and his being a survivor of throat cancer, which was obvious from his voice box and tracheotomy, when answering whether there were age and health factors to be taken into consideration, Officer Reyes checked no. Is the applicant a well-known public figure? No. Congressional or media interest? No. Does the applicant have a legitimate reason for entering the U.S.? No. Is the applicant's reason for entry based on an emergency? No. Credible claim of official misinformation? No. Is there a relationship to a U.S. employer or resident? Yes. Intent to circumvent admissibility requirements? No. Misrepresentations made by applicant during inspection process? No. Would the applicant be admissible if she or he had a valid passport and or visa? My uncle had both. Yes. Is there relief for the applicant through the parole or visa waiver process? No.